Okay, let's get started. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Meat and Potato Show, conservative talk and awesome rock. I am your host, Christopher Mader. Once again, we're filming this here at the Osgood Bradley building on the 4th floor at the Liberty Clubhouse, and running for state rep of the 4th District, currently seated by Dennis Rosa. He's a Democrat. Is my good guest, David Phillipo. How are you, sir? Welcome to the show.
I'm very good. I'm happy to be here. And
you had no trouble getting here, huh?
Yeah, I'm really used to the area. I mean, I grew up in Massachusetts. I grew up in Natick, but before I moved to Leominster, I lived in Bedford. I've worked throughout various places in the state, so I know my way.
Yeah, you know your way around. Of course, yeah, everybody. Yeah, it's not that big a state, so and definitely. So, tell us about you, how you got started in this, and you just said you grew up in the state. You know, where'd you go to school? Tell us about David.
Okay, well, so I started at the early beginning. I said I was born in Natick. I was born in '82. I'm only 31 years old, a little bit of a young guy, as I'm told by a lot of people in the campaign. I started out in the public school system, became a homeschool student, admittedly. But admittedly, that opened me a lot of doors. I actually was appointed by the local board of selectmen.
Really?
In Natick to be on the board of directors for Natick-Pegasus Inc., the local cable access station.
No kidding.
And helped to get from the ground up. And it was a very interesting experience. We actually ended up redoing the building very much like this building, as I think I hinted at before. And it's and it was a great opportunity. I had a lot of fun with it. Unfortunately, I had to go to college and kind of competed with the time, so I had to let that go. Went to Middlesex Community College for 2 years, studied communications. Did not get my degree there, but did go on to Emmanuel College, where I got my Bachelor of Arts in communications and a minor in performance arts.
Excellent.
Yeah. And then after working there, I did some teaching while I was working. I was an ESL, English as a second language instructor.
Really?
In middle
What was it? What's the other language that you speak?
I
was going to say, what's your name? Is that Portuguese? What is that?
It's Italian. Actually.
Oh, okay.
But admittedly, I didn't. It was Spanish, and admittedly, my Spanish was a lot better than it is now. What helped me was I had a great Spanish professor, Lavinia Lubreras. I don't know if anyone remember her, but she was a great professor, and she helped me to work out in her nonprofit called Alma Lingua Academies, and I took time helping her, volunteered, and I wasn't paid, and it was a great opportunity, and I was actually applying for a position with a company called NBCCES, which they taught at what's called immersion language, where I was teaching students of various languages, kind of from American culture, and continuing their education in the American language, English. So, and that was a very good experience. And then when I left college, when I did it all in college, I did work at a company called Computer Share, which is a stock transfer company.
Right.
I didn't want to stay in there too long, and then I've been serving the last almost 8 years in Constant Contact, where I do customer support.
Really? Yeah.
And it's a they do a lot of online sort of marketing stuff. Because the same Constant Contact, we sell a lot of products that help people, do your email marketing. If you want email campaigns to send out, if you need some surveys, if you want the information tracked, we'll do that for you. If you're planning an event, we'll track all that for you. If you want to grow likes on your Facebook page, we got a great tool for that. As well as we also have a tool called Single Platform.
Geez, maybe I have to talk to you and doing some stuff, even up the M&P page.
I'm more than happy to share.
Yeah, we started a second one, the Conservative Media Network, and there's pay options on there where I can boost you'd know a bit more about it than I do, but you can boost it. Of course, you got to pay without a credit card.
Yeah.
You can boost your links, everything else. So we started that, but that was quite literally just started about a week ago. So what made you get into doing this campaign? What was the impetus?
I'll take like a little step back.
Go ahead.
As a child, because it's kind of a different route, because they're obviously kind of not directly connected. But as a child, I always liked the presidents. I always get all the books and read them and flew through, and always thought it was fascinating to learn about them. And then, of course, picture day, I got excited as all hell because I got to dress up in a suit and be like the president. And it was great as a kid.
Back to the childhood, right?
Yeah. And then as I got older, I started learning about history, and even as I got older, I started really learning about politics and politicals. And admittedly, even though I was always a Republican, I used to admire a lot more Democrats and used to be a little bit unfortunately, more liberal-minded than I was. It took some time learning and really looking at, like I was talking to some people, the truth is about liberal solutions, they sound great. And you look at them, yeah, of course we want to help the poor. Of course we want to make sure people are disadvantaged and do what we can. Maybe, yeah, the rich are paying, they're not paying their fair share. Let's go and get their money. But what people fail to realize is what it does. It's what it does to the world. Because if you take money away from them, then they're just as poor as you are. Mm-hmm. It's not going to make. And if you're working for less, who's going to want to make more jobs if they're working for less? Also, too, if we tax them more, they're either going to do a few things. One, they're not going to hire as many jobs. They're either going to raise the prices of things for you and I cost more, or they're just going to go out of business. Mm-hmm. So what's the alternative?
And there's no incentive anymore. There's no incentive anymore to want to invent something.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, there's a ton of stuff that you see on YouTube, all over the internet, people doing stuff in their own garages and coming up with things. And they're all great ideas. You'll never see these things mass produced. You'll never see them mass produced because of corporations that have already got things sewn up and they don't want any type of competition. The other thing too is everything is so incredibly regulated. Even something starting as simple as a book swap. I was reading about this a while ago, like a book swap. You have to not only register it as a business, but every single book, and you know how people are with books, they just dump them. If there's a yard sale, they throw them all out, take them for a dime, or buy one, get one free. Books are a dime a dozen. But according to some states, every single book that you have has to be registered. You have to make sure that the copyright is expired. You can't sell it. Stupid things like you got to rip the front cover off, and if you don't, you'll quite literally have what you see all the time on the internet. You'll have SWAT teams and copyright people kicking in your doors and shutting your place down. Even something as simple as that. There's no incentive anymore for somebody to. Yeah, I got a great idea. I want to do this. Oh, wait a minute.
There's too many hoops and everything. And that's another thing, too, is one thing I love about Lebanon and learning about is it was the center of the plastic industry.
Sure.
And unfortunately, a lot of what Democrats and particularly liberals want to do is that they're worried about the type of workers that come out of the factory lifestyle. Like they seem to be shunned the idea of Henry Ford and the assembly line process. Mm-hmm. Yes, it was great for business, and maybe there were not the greatest conditions for the employees. That doesn't mean that the industry itself is wrong. Maybe we could do more to help those people so there's a better working environment.
I think they're also stuck in a time zone because they look at manufacturing, they look at American business, and they always default to the turn of the century, the Industrial Revolution, and they always seem to focus on that. In fact, sometimes when you see ads, they'll even use old type of film to show what's going on, and the entire process, the way people are today, I mean, we're far more savvy. We wouldn't stand for that anyway. It's got nothing to do with, there's regulations protecting me. You and I, if we were in a factory position, or you and I started a business, and we had a factory, I mean, we wouldn't be like, you gotta get to work at 6 and work till 10 o'clock at night, and there's no breaks, and we would never do something like that. We'd get punched in the face first.
And admittedly, the working world hasn't changed too much. Yes, I work at a desk, constant contact, and I sit in front of a computer. But in a way, the length of my job is not much different than a 9-to-5 guy working in a store. The only difference is I'm in front of a computer and I have a degree. That's the only difference. Otherwise, in the grand scheme of things, I'm not much different than any other working class Joe.
Yeah, and there are days when you probably hate it and your back hurts, you're sitting in the chair all day long.
I definitely need to lose some weight because a job where you sit down all day, you don't get the most exercise.
Sure.
So, something I definitely need to work on. Hopefully the campaign will help me that too.
Well, yeah, exactly. So anyway, yeah, you had the thing on the 11th, speaking about your campaign. It was with the Mass GOP. It was at Cornerstone's restaurant. You had a few people show up, not as many as that you would hope. But tell us about that. How did things go at least, what'd you talk about?
Well, I said they wanted me to do kind of like a 5-point speech, talking about myself, my background, and what I wanted to get out of the campaign. And really, I mean, if I want to kind of reiterate what I talk about, kind of paraphrase it, is essentially the short of it is I'm looking to get out there to represent the people of Leominster. I want to be a real representative. I have to check to see if Dennis has really done this one. I do see he does. He's out there. I'll give him that credit. But I really don't feel like a lot of representatives aren't really listening to the people. they come out like a dictator. Well, this is what's best for them. I'm going to pass this legislation.
Right.
That's not what I want. I'm going to be the guy that comes in your community. I'm going to have meetings up. I'm going to send emails out. This is the bill that's coming up on the floor. I'm going to be voting on this. And I'll put out, this is my opinion right now. How do you feel about it?
Right.
I'm not going to jump the gun and say, well, this is how I feel about it, and hope you like it. No, that's not the type of that's not the way our founders wanted. We're supposed to be representatives, not dictators.
This seems to be that seems to be the way it is, even in our state house. We all know that trick. Everybody waits to see how DeLeo's going to vote, and then everybody votes accordingly. And the other thing I wanted to cover is that you make a great point about you're not sure if you see Dennis around a lot. I see a lot of representatives now, and I meet a lot of people all the time because simply because I'm involved in the show and I'm part of the Liberty Movement. So I'm in touch with a lot of representatives and people running for office. But I've got to admit, you make a very good point. Before that, I don't remember actually seeing my representative's offices here in Worcester or a representative's office in Marlborough. They'd always see them at election time. You'd see them rent the store out, clean it up, post all the signs. You see them march in the Labor Day parade, the Memorial Day parade, this town or that town. But you never actually see the people. It's not like, well, where can I go to Dennis's office? Where to talk to Dennis or talk to somebody and make sure Dennis gets this message? Or I'm a local business owner and I'm having trouble with this permit process of the town. Is there something we can do? Is there something you can help out with? I don't see a lot of that here in Massachusetts. And is that something that you're talking about, that you really want to be a hands-on?
I want to be, because we'll be representing Leominster, I'm not representing Beacon Hill. I want to be in Leominster most of my time. Listen, the only time I'm going to leave is when I have to go vote for something.
Sure.
Or occasionally if I want to introduce new legislation, and I'm only going to be introducing new legislation based upon something that's impacting Leominster directly, that I think would help the whole state.
Right.
That would, you know, that I would feel would help everybody. And it's across the scale, this whole issue, because an example of this, not to put him down, I really don't know about our new Senator Ed Markey, if he really lives up here or down in, or I think it's in Virginia.
Yeah, he's down there. He really is. I've looked into this, and this is the other thing. Same thing with Lizzie Hiawatha Warren. I mean, her house, I think it's in Cambridge. She only bought that house relatively recently.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say just prior to her campaign, but of course these people, they plan a good year or so in ahead. So it wasn't like she lived there all her life type of thing. Whereas somebody like you grew up here in Massachusetts, you've been here, you've been around the area, you know how people tick around here.
And maybe, admittedly, they are up here and they just don't take the time to meet it with us, which is where they're wrong. Because a lot of Dennis, I actually bumped into Ed Markey because when I lived in Medford,
Sure.
he claims that that's his hometown. It's a Colleen's restaurant in Medford Square. If you ever want an opportunity to meet Ed Markey, occasionally around election time you'll find him in there.
Yeah, go to the restaurant.
And that's how I found him in there. I just watched back in 2012 he had a debate against Tom Tierney, who was a Republican candidate, and I said, that's Ed Markey sitting over there. I walked over, said hello, told him I'm a Republican, but he was very polite and cordial. He actually asked me how I did, how he did, I should say, how he did on his,
in your area.
mind you, when I was living there at the time. Very nice guy, but I'll tell you, that was the first time I was actually very surprised to see him there. And from what I observed, from what people told me, that he's never really up there. He's never really in town. So either he is, and he just doesn't meet with the people, which is where he's wrong, or he just spent most of his time, he was right there in D.C., so he doesn't have a long commute. Which is sad, because you go back in time, I really wonder about the poor people that were representing California, that they come on horseback every few months to vote.
Exactly.
You know, God bless those people. Where the hell are those people? That now like, you know, Nancy Pelosi needs an airplane to make sure she can get here.
Military escort.
Yeah. Come on, what are we coming to? It's another example where I really think the government has gone too far. I'd love to see a system where we limited their pay based upon the national, at least for federal employees, all of us top to bottom.
Right.
Make it so that they can't get paid more than a national income average. What is it, like 50,000-ish?
Sure, right.
That capped it at that.
They're at the hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, and what's sad too, it's funny, there's no federal government employee at the top. We're talking about the Supreme Court, House of Representatives, Senate office, you name it, the Secretary, well, there's one office I'll tell you that's not paid now, which is funny. Everyone's paid 100,000 plus. Except for, which is weird, the Department of Education gets paid less than I do. And I can't quote the exact number, but last time I checked, they're getting $29,000 a year. Now, I want to debate, do we need all these departments? I'd rather have, like education, I'd rather all handle locally. If I had my way, I'd rather do more to make it better locally. I think Leominster schools could be a lot better on their
The
own.
entire
without
nation
some
feels
help.
that way anyway, especially with Common Core. We can talk about that in a few minutes too.
But what's odd is, why is that one the only one that's paying 29? This is just the Democrats, they care so much about education. Why is that the one that we're paying the least? I mean, I'm only making $40,000 a year. This place is they're only getting 29. This guy's only getting, I think I'm not sure it's a man or a woman.
And they're in DC, and that's an expensive town.
Yeah, 29,000 a year. Unless there was a typo on the site that I read that. After looking for it, I read that, but still.
That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it's odd. It's odd. I don't know why all of those are 100,000 plus. This one's 29,000. But
So you have children, or just
I
a baby?
have just my first baby. Is my first one.
All right. So
Yeah.
I was going to ask you about children and Common Core and stuff.
I don't support Common Core.
Yeah, there was just a protest a little while ago here. Arnie Duncan came to Worcester Vote Tech right up here on Belmont Street, and Worcester Tea Party was there. A lot of people wrote, the news covered it. It's, and I've got to find some stuff on it and get that posted. But and Donna Calorio is coming. We're going to be at the Canal Bar on the 20th. The Tea Party is going to be, you ought to show up there on the 20th. The Canal Bar is right over here on Water Street. At 7 o'clock, and we can talk afterwards about that, but she's going to come out, and she used to be on the school committee, and we're going to talk about Common Core. The entire, Joseph Califano, former education secretary under Jimmy Carter, when it was first started, made the claim that the federal control of the curriculum is the federal control of ideas, and everybody, like everything else in government, government has inexorably gotten bigger and bigger. The plan starts out to do something good. You just covered that. But it invariably just gets, the application gets perverted, the purpose gets perverted. What ends up happening is eventually the bill comes back up for reenactment, and they always find a way to say that things haven't gotten any better, so we need more money. Well, here's where we are with the educational department now. Common Core was slipped in under part of the stimulus bill. So why don't you lend in and give enough dissertation on the history? What is your opinion? I mean, everybody I talk to, it's a bad idea.
Yeah, it gets down to the idea that we're letting the government decide too many things for us. And I think a lot of the problem is that a lot of people don't underestimate themselves. Like honestly too, I really think, to kind of put it back into Leominster, we're smart people. We're not stupid idiots. We know how to come together and decide what curriculums are best for our children. We don't have the right to tell Fitchburg, which is a neighboring city to Leominster, and we don't have the right to tell people in Beverly Hills, California, how to raise their kids. Let's keep it in Leominster. We'll come together as parents and we'll decide what's right for our children. We're not idiots. We know what's best for our children. And I'm sure we're all rational adults. We can decide what's right for our children. Maybe if the government wants to, then they can set suggestions. And if there's some people that want to go by the book, that's fine. That's their right as a parent.
Go back to block grants. Just if you apply for this, we can give you this grant money. X thousands of dollars or maybe $1 million for this if you come up with a program and you need a grant.
Yeah, leave it simple, leave it local. I mean, essentially, I don't want to go too far out of it, but essentially, I would love a system that got down just to bare local rules, where we pay all of our taxes and we make all of our laws in the local city or town that we live in. Very little laws at the federal level, very little taxes at the federal level, and a state comes somewhere in the middle, and most of this is made right in town. That would include education. Us as people will decide it. We'll come together, we'll have a town meeting or a city meeting. We'll decide it, and if it doesn't work, there should be encouragement for people to secede, not from the country, but from a city or a town, or if there's enough people from a state, and make their own community. That's what the founders intended upon.
Right.
We're really ever-growing, ever-evolving, changing shape community all over, whether it's a city or town changing shape, whether it's a state changing. We should be sitting for the country, because there's a reason why we're a country as a whole. That's why I would never support the Southern secession in the Civil War, which is a different topic. But I do support the idea, and it happens all the time. Texas is a great example. They actually seceded from Dallas, Texas, because they didn't like the property taxes, and God bless them for doing it. And they have a great town that's still there today called Texas.
No kidding.
Yeah,
I did not know that.
And I honestly think too, if people don't like the electric, which I just don't think we're being listened to. There's a lot of great ideas to change the electric around, and it really is. It's really expanding. A lot of people are afraid of the electoral college, but the truth is it protects minority opinion.
It does. It does.
It protects minority opinion, because if you think about it, if we just allow the popular vote, then pretty much we don't have to vote. Whatever Boston votes for here, well, that's what's going to happen.
That's exactly
Whatever Boston votes for, that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's a population thing, and that's also a problem with some of our congressmen to Washington and even our senators. Of course, we've changed the whole thing to now senators are just popularly elected. Very bad idea. But let's take the case of like Barney Frank's whole district.
Yeah.
If you look on the map, it's got probably the strangest shape of any district. It's got parts of down the South Shore, not necessarily the Cape, but the South Shore, the Taunton, Raynham area, that area down in there, Plainville, that kind of area. And then, which are, you know, substantial towns, but not as densely populated. They tend to run a little more conservative, a little more Republican. And I watched this at, I think it was in 2010. He was still there. It wasn't until later on that he decided to retire. But I noticed the way the voting went, and it was reported in one of the local news stations that most of that area voted for the Republican candidate. I forget who it was at the time. But then once the returns came in around the Natick, Wellesley, Cambridge, because of the population, and like I said, it's if you look at his district, it literally has like a turkey neck that runs up through, and then it's like this bubble of Metro West. And so again, once Metro West started voting, they all vote Democrat, and it was just a population thing. So a little gerrymandering going on there. So,
which is why I really like the idea of expanding the for college to go to the point. Well, first I want to take up what Nebraska and Maine do, where you have to win in their each individual districts. But I also think in that regard too, is I think our founding fathers made a grave mistake, is they never dictated exactly what constitutes making a congressional district. It wasn't very specific. And the only thing I think that would make sense is if we take the number of total municipalities in the country, and we divide that by the number of states. And if I remember correctly, that's like 1,760 districts. And then each state gets a percentage of that based upon the percentage of the population.
that's interesting.
So what I figured out was Massachusetts would get 37 congressional districts that way. So a little higher than before, but it's more representation. Because I really think it's all about the smaller communities. And we get more representation on the federal level that way. And there's less opportunity for somebody to be dictating overhead, because our little community would be that much more represented.
Sure.
And also with that, and I also thought of rules to how people would win. A congressional district candidate in that regard would need to win the popular vote in a majority of cities and towns in that particular district to win. If they don't win the majority, they don't win it, and essentially the top. I try to make a clause there because I hate people winning without a majority. But essentially, if there was everybody who won 30% or better, the electoral vote would be split up for that people, whatever that one congressional district vote is. And whoever wins the majority, because right now when you're running an election, there's the 2 Senate seats, which are 2 electoral votes, and then there's whatever congressional districts are added up, right? So the winner of whoever won the majority, the popular vote in a majority of cities and towns in the entire state would get those 2 extra votes.
Excellent.
So it would really force a candidate to really get locally, get all around to get all those votes. Really force them to really make sure they're everywhere, and really force them to be in. And really make sure my vote is represented, not just one person. Because everything one vote, one man, one vote doesn't really work that way when you're not counted as a group. If you're counted in a group, you're going to be represented much better. Because and that's it too. It'll help you decide where they want to live. But don't you want to live with people that respect your viewpoint, and know that your viewpoint is going to count something? And if we know that, say it happens to be Leominster. Leominster votes typically more Republican than Democrat, or somewhere in the middle, we're going to clearly see that and know, okay, Leominster votes this way. This is the city or town that I want to live in, because I see clearly how they vote. This is the area that I want to be, where I know I'm going to be happy, because they clearly share my values. It'll set up a map like that. And it pretty much you can do all elections like that. Like if you're running not for state rep, but for a representative, like in my district, the 2nd district, which is Danny Brule, I am supporting as a candidate, a Republican candidate for my district. What he would have to do in this case is he have to win to be elected. He have to win the popular vote in a majority of cities and towns in the 2nd congressional district. He'd have to win that to be able to win that seat. If you're running for Senate, because admittedly, like you said, it used to not be a popular vote decision.
Sure.
I hate the government's hand in too much, and I think it's too much control for them to pick that person out. I'd rather keep us doing it, but I would kind of do, kind of like I just said for the president, that to win, they have to win the popular vote in a majority of cities and towns in the entire state. And if we did it that way, Scott Brown would have won. He would have been elected and re-elected, no question. Because if you look, more cities and towns, and that's Gabriel Gomez, the same thing. There are more cities and towns in the state that would prefer Republicans. And I really wish it was represented that way, because in the end, it's what your city and state does that represents you that's going to protect you. That should be the end result that protects you. If your city or town is voting opposite the federal government, the way that things are structured now, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. You're not going to get anything done. It's going to hurt you.
That's an interesting insight. That's unbelievable. Yeah. Thanks for that. That was a great idea.
And admittedly, too, you can take that a step further for state rep or local governor's race.
And do the same thing.
Except like I use the example with the state, you make the counties replace the state. And I did that to be 25 state congressional districts. So admittedly, I'd be running for one of 25 for state rep. So
interesting. That's something. Whether that will happen or not.
It's a very involved. The other thing is too is that some of the best stuff. Because admittedly, I think we touched on you want me to mention about Herman Cain.
Yeah. Let's talk about that. So let's segue. Go right, keep going. Segue right into that.
Okay, well, Herman Cain, I was a happy supporter of him. He's a great candidate. He had a lot of energy. He had a lot of great ideas. I think he would have been.
I think he was railroaded with that affair.
I think there was a lot of trouble going on there that went against him. I really don't think it was really totally his fault. And I think he would have been a great candidate. And I got into my mistake. I'm the type of person that. And it's funny that I'm running now, is that when you're always going to go, you should always think you're the best candidate there is. And I tell everybody right now, if you want to run for office, do it. If you don't like what your government's, get out there and run yourself. Do it. Yeah, it costs money, and it can be tough, but in the grand scheme of things, it's better to just get that word out there. Because if you lose this time, because you didn't have that money, people are going to remember you next time around. Maybe they'll give you more money next time around. Just get your name out there. Because that's what used to happen.
And they see you keep coming back. That is one thing I've noticed with doing this show since 2008 is I interview a ton of candidates, but very few of them come back the next election cycle to repeat the process again. A lot of them jump in, you don't see them again. And it's money, and they have their personal reasons. But you're right. If you can, even if you lose this this election cycle, keep your hat in the ring, keep going on, keep your office open, keep that going, and come back in the next election cycle. More people. I was explaining this to a guy that I interviewed from Texas a couple of weeks ago. He's going to do the same thing. He's going to keep his hat in, and you just have the slow rise over time. It might take you 3 or 4 times to get in, but by the time that 4th, maybe even 5th time that you're running, it's practically a shoo-in for you.
And admittedly, what's sad too is that people are forgetting that historically, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, the first election ever, they did not campaign at all.
Even people like Ronald Reagan ran, I think, 4 times before he finally became president.
So what I meant
and look at Romney. Romney, I think he's been running, and he's not going to run again, but he kept running and running at every presidential election, and this last time was the closest he was ever going to get.
Well, what I more meant is that people need to get more involved and wrapped around candidates, even if they're ones that I totally support. I do hate that we're the lesser of 2 evils. That's another part of the idea of changing the electoral process I'd like to see, because we get too far away from, we don't take time to get the really back candidates that we should, because historically, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, they never really campaigned themselves. Somebody else was doing it for them. They had their own handler, their own people. And we really should take the time. One of the things I did, and this is how I met Herman Cain, was that I went up online, I said, who's running for office? Really, I aligned myself with the Republicans. They're the closest I can get. And really, sadly, we are lesser 2 evils with the 2-party politics. No way around it. I do have another idea we can talk later about how I think we can eliminate that. But in a sense, that's what it is. It's awful something because sometimes we don't get the best people, but we get good people. Like Scott Brown, I like the guy, he's a great person. Not 100% of the issues I agree with on, maybe 60-40.
That's right.
Maybe 60-40, but he was a darn sight better than Elizabeth Warren or Roger Coakley. And I'm afraid to death of her running for governor now. That's why I endorsed Charlie Baker in the same way.
Sure.
And that's why too, I mean, not everybody's going to be exactly like me, but I really wish people had a lot of that mindset, that drive to say, these are the candidates running, let's do what we can to get them elected. There's a whole bunch of people running. Right now, there's a whole bunch of people running. I don't know if people know them. There's Patricia St. who's running for Secretary of the Commonwealth, and actually I should say that Patricia St. Aubin is running for the Auditor's Office. There's also Mike Heffernan, who's running for the State Treasurer.
That's true.
As well as, there's no one running for Attorney General. So if you're a lawyer and you want to run up, I encourage you to get in now. We need somebody in that seat.
Exactly.
Especially because Martha Coakley is tentatively on that ballot as well. So, you know, just get her out.
Yeah, exactly.
One way or the other.
There's a whole plethora of Democrats and progressives running for. There's actually one. Actually, her website. She claims to be a progressive, ultra left-wing Democrat. I forget her name, but there's a whole bunch of people running for governor. And Republicans, I think, I know of Baker and I know of Fisher, but I'm not sure if there's anybody else running there.
I think that's it for the Republicans.
Keep going though about the Herman Cain thing.
But yeah, we kind of sidetracked.
That's okay. We all
But,
this is the show. This is the way we do it.
But and with that, I love the debates. I think that is. I get afraid that people were upset with the debates. They think they took away from it. I think that honestly helped us get in, and that's how I got behind Herman Cain. The very first debate that was on, I think it was on Fox News. He clearly won it, and I think he went on to win it every other time. And the fact that he was the one who stood up there the first time, and he was so well on the money with every comment he made, I had to back him that moment. And then I went out of my way online to find ways to connect with him and other supporters out there. I became a friend of his on Facebook. And I also got involved with a lot of people in the campaign, and they involved me in the campaign. And you know, we did a lot of fun posts of it. Like I tried to find songs that could kind of paraphrase what he was doing. Like I joke, like you know that song "Power of Love" by Huey Lewis. I revised the lyrics so it's like "Power of Cain," you know. Don't need no credit card to ride the Cain train, you know, stuff like that. It's because people, of course, made the "Rock You Like Herman Cain," you know, the Scorpion song.
Exactly, right.
That's like the classic one, you know. And that's the thing that's sad. It's historically true, but people more often than not vote for the most entertaining candidate, which Herman Cain had. I'm not going to say that was his only thing, but admittedly, people want to vote for the most, and he was probably one of the more entertaining figures. That's why Reagan won. That's why Bush won and he lost. Because first time around he was going against the guy that let rapists out.
That's right.
Swinging door policy.
Yes, the caucus and the Willie Hortons.
And he said, I'd be enraged if someone tried to rape my wife. You know, no compassion. So naturally you're going to vote the guy that's obviously more compassionate. But then when he goes to a guy playing a saxophone, I want to vote for the guy with the saxophone.
Exactly, the Arsenio Hall show.
Yeah. So it seems very easy, you know, for people, and I think it's sometimes who we are. We're very, you know, especially now with social media, it's very easy to go for and in some ways I say the same why Obama, because he does seem like a likable guy in the program. But until you deep down dig in and see what he's like, you realize this isn't good. This isn't good for America. If you really believe in the values and the representative of what this company started as, he is not that guy. Mitt Romney may not be perfect, but he was a darn sight closer than anything he was going to. Same thing with John McCain, although John McCain, I've been a little disappointed about some of the changes he's made politically in recent times, but I mean, he's still a Republican. If he ran again, I guess I'd back him in the end. And with Herman Cain, I was head over heels with, you know, the way he was running his campaigns, what he said about 999. I know something kind of departed from the fair tax, even though the fair tax was part 2 of 999 all along.
Exactly.
And I think what people fail to realize, people think it was like 2 taxes, but it really wasn't. Because what it does is you're wiping out all taxes on the table, and then you just the corporate, just the personal income tax, and there was the other one, which is personal income and sales tax, of course. That's how where the fair tax would eventually come in. And it's simple, and it really, admittedly, I did the math, and you could, I don't know if it's still around, it's unfortunate. If you look at Herman Cain 999 calculator, something like that, you could probably find if there's still one floating around. Do the math, and you can type in the Massachusetts sales tax. I did the math, I used to post this all the time, because like I said, I was a big supporter, and every morning I used to buy a cup of coffee in my work at a coffee shop. Be $4.15. Put the amount in buying the pre-tax amount, which I think was like $4 or something. Whatever, put that amount in the calculator. And I entered in the Massachusetts sales tax and the 9%. I only would be paying $3.85.
Sure.
It is, I will admit, taking in the assumption that businesses will lower their prices on the fact that now they're not paying all these other taxes. Because you realize right now, people try to call it a value-added tax. That's kind of what we have now. Anything you buy at the store, you're paying the baker's tax that he made to make the bread. You're paying if you're getting a sandwich, you know, you're paying whoever got the tomatoes. you're paying out every piece of it. You're paying out every piece of it. And I would think, in most cases, small business owners, they make money by being the cheaper guy out there. They have that opportunity. Like I thought one time getting a consultant job. And the way I get in there is being cheaper than that other consultant. That's how you do it. That's how you usually break in. You be cheaper than the other guy. And admittedly, it would create that opportunity for that. And I also believe, too, it would go a long way to get deflation, which I think, in the situation where we need it. Because historically, if you look at the world and the way the economy has been historically, yes, yes, things were, the job may not have been great. Yes, there may have been a lower minimum wage. But I think if you're getting paid $1 an hour, if you go back in like to the, before the day, just after Great Britain in the 1940s, you could buy a week's worth of groceries with $1.
Yeah, my parents, we all remember that. Well, you were born in '82. I was the last.
Unfortunately, we got born in a Reagan.
I was the last of the baby boomers, and I remember my parents not earning a lot of money, but they bought our house for $15,000 at 5.25% interest. My father was working a blue collar job. He worked a grocery store, stocking shelves on the weekends and after work. And my mother didn't work. I don't remember not having a car. I don't ever remember not having a television set and food on the table and a warm house. And then there was money. We went to England. My mother has family over. We used to go to England. We went on a vacation every year. We went up to Canada a couple of summers. I remember I was talking to Jeff Boudreau, who was on the show a while ago, and he had mentioned that, see, none of that exists anymore for people unless you earn a really good living. And that what we all have to do now is everything is just trying to get through the week. Everything is just trying to survive. And my wife and I, we work very hard at what we do. And we don't buy a lot. We don't spend. We're not frivolous. But there's not a lot left over. There really isn't. And we'd like to go away this summer. We weren't able to do it last year. And when we say go away, yeah, we'd like to go up to Hampton Beach for the weekend. Or maybe we'll go up to Wells, Maine for the weekend. And rent a cheap motel kind of thing. Yeah. We don't want to go to the Ritz or anything like that, but we can't do that.
Yeah, and it's funny, you talk about vacations. Yes, because it's funny because you talk about Obama, everybody gets upset. And technically he is doing non-tax-payer development. It's the money that we're supposed to pay him. He'll go on all these vacations. It's kind of a slap in the face though when people are struggling and you're going on all these extravagant vacations. I don't care who you are. I don't think FDR was going on all these vacations like that when the Great Depression. Yeah, he went to Warm Spring, Georgia, went in his pool to polio. Yeah. I don't think any harm in that. He wasn't like bloated in the face. It almost seems like Obama was trying to celebrate the fact that he's got this wonderful house to live in, all these benefits. Now,
FDR had his place in the Hamptons, and there's a great biography. There was actually a movie that was put out about it. Bill Murray's in it, and I forget the other. Laura Linney was in it. But it was based on a biography that was written about it. And what FDR used to do, and this was before Camp David, FDR used to use it for diplomacy. He had the King and Queen of England over there, just to the onset of World War II. He used to have parts of the cabinets come out there, and he used to work out on the White House during it would be like his second White House, again, before Camp David. It was a great biography, but it wasn't like he was out there vacationing and playing golf and not doing anything. It was just kind of like his way of getting away from the hustle of Washington, where he could concentrate, meet with people from around the world, and actually hash out problems and figure things out. So that when he did come back to Washington, we've got a solution to the problem, and this is what we're going to do.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is that with the vacations, kind of go back.
But Obama's not doing it, he's just shooting golf.
Yeah, he just wants to have fun and enjoy himself. And in some way, yes, he works hard, he should do it, but does he have to go that extreme? And then too worse when he's blocking traffic in town because we want to do it, and he's up in Martha's Vineyard, we want a good time, he's blocking traffic because we need all that security for him. And actually that's one thing I debated too, is why are we at the point that the president needs so much security? Although some argue that Abraham Lincoln needed more security. But was it because we're in a time of war? Because in some ways, John Wilkes Booth was more of a military combatant than just your average Joe Schmo. He wasn't a U.S. citizen at the time. He was at that point. what was a foreign country attacking its president.
Exactly.
So then that's a different type of protection than someone from at home. And I really wonder if the reason why that it's right, but why some people would want to kill the president is because they feel like the president is too involved in their own lives. Although it's tough to say though, because look at more recent attempts. I don't know if that necessarily was John Hinckley's angling for when he attempted Ronald Reagan. I don't know if Sarah Jane Moore or what was the other one? She was with Charles Manson.
Squeaky Fromm.
Yes, Squeaky Fromm went after Jerry Ford, or Lee Harvey Oswald. Which admittedly, I'll tell you right now, I'm on the fence of what really happened.
Sure, me too.
I don't know if I trust the Warren Commission or not. And admittedly, too, I used to be, because I'm not a Democrat at all. I'm admittedly coming around to liking John F. Kennedy a lot more, because he really was against a lot of higher taxes. He was much more. He didn't like the Federal Reserve. I don't know if we can eliminate the Federal Reserve from the get-go, but I definitely think it's maybe run its course.
It's definitely, yeah, it's run its course, and it's definitely part of the problem.
And it's maybe like him a lot more, but some argue, I don't know if it's true, that may be why he became a target, because JFK was against the Federal Reserve. He wanted to eliminate it, supposedly. And that made him a potential target. And any violence is never the answer, but I really wonder if it's the society we created, which made people think, that they need to attack them. Because historically, we never thought they would need to do it. We're a system of laws. And maybe it's the point that we've led a society where there's too much control. Because essentially, that's why, admittedly, why people forget why the Second Amendment is there. It's where the government gets out of control. So it's debatable whether or not somebody would do this if they're acting, they're out their Second Amendment rights or not. And I get into a lot of debates with people that are saying almost to give up now because everything's so bad. Don't even bother voting. Because I think, honestly, it's a large way if we work together, the ballot is much more powerful than the bullet.
Of course it is, sure.
And the bullet should only be the extreme last resort. And I get frustrated when people try to say that we're at that point now and we need to start getting bullets. No, we still got a chance here. It's not that bad. It may feel like that. And because people are quick to jump to anarchy as a solution all the time. And that's not the answer. Right? That's why in some ways too, is I do like a lot of libertarian ideas, and I do try to find a lot of libertarian solutions, that I too often find that a lot of libertarians, they come off like anarchists, particularly the anarcho-capitalists.
Sure.
Not to put down a libertarian, because in general, grand scheme of things, they've got a lot of the right ideas.
Sure.
That's why I like Ron Paul. In the grand scheme of things, what he wanted to do was great. It just seemed way extreme for what, because I think honestly, I take a little bit from the John Birch Society, whereas, far left means total extreme government, and far right means no government whatsoever. And I honestly believe that a true conservative is really a moderate. Not what we call a moderate right now. This is true. Because really, the founders really wanted was a delicate balance between anarchy and oligarchy. They wanted to make sure that we're not totally oppressed, but we're free. And to only have a civil society, you need to keep working to put one bill on top of another bill to counteract that until, so that way it's a perfect society. And that's what was intended, but I think we've gone so far to the left that it scares people. And admittedly, too, there's a lot of Republicans who are supposed to be on our side, and we're going to call them rhinos and moderates, because they keep caving into a few of those little left ideas.
They certainly do. They keep thinking that if they become more acquiescent and more like the left, and in fact, the term is floating out there. They're called Republicrats now.
Yeah.
That maybe we can win elections. Maybe we can, open things up more to this demographic or that demographic, and that's a terrible mistake that they're making. I think they should. Because it is going so far left, I think you almost have to fight fire with fire now, is that you have to push a more conservative candidate, possibly a far-right conservative candidate.
I agree.
Almost like a Reagan-esque, like that Christian coalition that helped get him, only to bring back balance, because it is so far left, you need to get a heavy weight on the other side, just to balance out that seesaw.
What's the thing they're afraid of? They're afraid that we're going to lose the independent vote, and they go right after the independent vote without the base. And the truth is, we can't win without the base. And the truth is, what Ronald Reagan did that was right is he brought in the base, and he was able to bring in a good number of right-leaning independents. And that's what we need. We need somebody that can be like Ronald Reagan. Admittedly, though, like I said, Ronald Reagan was very entertaining, former actor. He had a very great presence. I mean, there you go again.
Yeah.
Or,
I will not let my opponent's youth and whatever he said,
Or I am paying for this microphone, Mr. Green. And he really had a way to catch the audience. So, and that's why too, like especially too after what happened to Herman Cain, I really wonder what's in store for anybody who tries to be like Herman Cain.
Right.
That off the wall, like I think it goes back to one of our mistakes, and this is why I don't like third parties, because we have a two-party system. And it kind of goes to what I was talking before about my idea for eliminating the two-party system, is that no matter what, they're going to be a spoiler. Like, I don't think the Democratic Party probably would be gone or on its way out had Ross Perot stayed out in 92 and 96.
Certainly.
I still feel like
George Bush's book, Decision Points, when I read that book, he covered that chapter, his father losing the election, and he didn't really have two kind words for Ross Perot, and it wasn't like he was using negativity towards Ross Perot as an individual. He was using it as far as it was the wrong thing to do professionally.
Yeah.
And if you wanted to run for president, you should have waited till my father finished his second term. Challenge Clinton in an open election. But
because admittedly, I mean, I did the math. I mean, it's tough to say if all Perot voters would have gone to Bush.
it was quite literally, basically less than, if you split the numbers, it ranged between 38% and 34%, 36%, and whatever the numbers were. When you really boil it down, a third of the electorate, the people who voted, actually elected our president. And here's where the numbers is. Somebody else cracked these numbers down even worse. That's just people that voted.
Yeah.
Okay? That's not the entire general population. So you're looking at President Clinton. Oh, he won by a landslide. Less than 10% of the American people.
He won by 40, I think it was 43%.
Yeah, some weird number like that.
Yeah.
How do you win by that?
That's not really
only because it was a third. That's not a win.
That's not a win, unless you get over. That's why I think too. And if you look at history, since Ronald Reagan, we haven't had a candidate win. Democrats are over 50%,
Sure.
over 55%, I should say.
And here's what the thing. In one of my exposés, I was writing about voter fraud. That's a big 5-part thing that I did. One of the things that I had uncovered in my research is exactly what you just said, is we haven't had a major election where anything's gone over 50%. Another interesting thing that comes out is when you have a majority a win, like let's say it's 54% to 46%, you have a big number like that. Two things happen. One, you know that the nation is behind this person. Two, it eliminates the possibility of voter fraud because the gap is too big.
Yeah.
When the gap gets between 1% and 2%, the potential for voter fraud, it's enormous. Because that's one reason why the vote is, because you have a lot of people casting fake ballots just because, we're going to lose, but we might not lose. We might only lose by 1 or 2 points if we do this.
Yeah. And admittedly, too, and I still wonder, I mean, it's tough to say, it's one because of the machine the Democrats have. I still wonder if there was a lot of fraud last year. I read somewhere, I wish I could remember where it was. Supposedly, Massachusetts, I think we had 129% voter turnout.
Yeah,
how is that
Massachusetts is a big state. Massachusetts is a big voter fraud state. Again, on my research, Georgia's a big state. Maryland, Delaware. I said Georgia. What the hell? I want to say Florida, but Florida really became the center of the spotlight because of what happened in 2000, and I covered that all in the expose. Again, it's also perception too, because after it was finally decided Bush is going to be the president, the big mantra was that Bush stole the presidency.
Yeah.
When I went through my research, it turns out that it was Al Gore who was originally trying to tilt the whole thing by starting off by having ballots recounted only in his primarily Democrat districts. And in those districts, well, of course he was ahead. They're primarily Democratic districts. And the reason why Bush finally got into it and sued is because there was a violation of the 14th Amendment protection, equal protection under the clause. And so he said, and the Supreme Court of Florida agreed. It's like, he's right. If you're going to recount the votes, you got to recount every single vote all across the state. And what they found out is, even though eventually they put a halt to it because they kept recounting and recounting, and every time Bush kept coming out ahead. And then finally, in the last recount, when they stopped it, which everybody complained about, is technically at this point in time, Al Gore was a little bit ahead. But the Supreme Court said, no, that's it, we're getting too close to the deadline, this is it, give the electoral votes to Bush, Bush becomes president. Well, come to find out later on, an independent group went in and recounted those last ballots. Again, George Bush won.
Yeah, it kind of goes to the idea I said this before, because we had a system when it was really popular vote in specific cities and towns. You'd see a whole lot of people looking at, like, specifically Miami, specifically these towns, seeing where that, we probably would have found much quicker, oh, Bush obviously won. If we'd see easily where the fractions were that were the ones in question. Would it be like a whole mass county that we have to count, where there's, right there's not really a question of recounting the whole county, as opposed to one city or town. And I think that's why I say right now would eliminate that. And also, the argument they're going to make then, if it's because that's the case, then why did anybody claim that Benjamin Harrison stole the election of 1888? Or well, some of us still think Rutherford B. Hayes stole the election in 1876, because debatably, I almost think he won, again, a little historical thing, I almost think he ended the Reconstruction a little too soon. But some argue that that was the problem. Supposedly he told some of the Southern Democrats, hey, if you let me win, I'll end the Reconstruction. It's the argument that happened. I don't know, supposedly, there's a lot of argument that conversation never took place. There's something to do. But it's very funny that the Reconstruction ended immediately after, and I still wonder if it was too soon, and probably why we have a lot of the race problem we have today, and why we had segregation going on for so long. That I'll remind you, yes, the Democrats put the Jim Crow laws in place.
They did.
The Democrats voted against the Civil Rights Movement.
They did. They certainly did. In fact, in my research in voter fraud, I found time and time again, and there were various independent research groups who studied all this voter fraud, where I got a lot of my information from. It is, I know I'm going to get a lot of crap for this, I don't care, it's my show. It is Democrat driven. It really is. In fact, there's a national plan, there's a national trend towards that. Hillary Clinton tried to get a voter law put through just prior to her run for the presidency itself. The organizations that are out there, there's one called the New Organizing Institute. All of these are openly admitted progressivist, liberal voting organizations. And their whole design is to nationalize the voting system, to get everybody hooked up into a central database, go out into poor neighborhoods, rural areas, get all these people registered and put into this database. On the surface, that sounds like a good idea. Let's get everybody registered. But these are openly progressive, admittedly liberal groups. You know which way they're going to have you registered to vote. In fact, what will end up happening is, because some of these people, and it's on their website, the New Organizing Institute, what they will do is they will put your name in, and if you can't get to the ballot, they'll actually cast your ballot for you. Now you know which way they're going.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a national trend. Republicans have been accused of voter fraud. What I've been able to find, and what some of these other independent groups, yes, it exists. It's a local thing, a mayoral race, maybe a congressman here in some rural area, or some other state representative who just happens to have a lot of pull in a certain area. There's no national trend as far as the Republicans are concerned. It just simply, I couldn't find anything. But in the Democrats, you just go on YouTube, just go on Google, just search it, and the screen lights up with all these progressive, liberal, organized, Acorn is molded into something else. It's everywhere.
It's kind of the same idea. They try to say that the Tea Party is so violent people, and we want these violent things. Show me one video where you see a bunch of Tea Party where they're all being violent. But then you can also encourage you to you'll find plenty of progressive liberal videos where they're talking about off with these people's heads and things, because
look what they did in Wisconsin during the
Occupy protest.
Look at the Occupy people, smashing and burning things. Every time I've ever been to a Tea Party protest, a Tea Party rally, we're like drinking coffee, joking, having fun, just holding our signs, doing our things. When we have our meetings, we go down to I told you.